All right, welcome back to the Anti-Media Hour 2. Thank you to UCY.TV for letting us broadcast. My name is Jake Anderson, and we have a cool show for you tonight. We're going to be talking about a very controversial subject, which you're probably familiar with if you're listening to this show, false flags. And this is a show I've been looking forward to since before we even booked it, because I've been wanting to do a show with a guest who knows their shit about false flags. And tonight's guest, Danny Quest, does. He's a hardcore truther, and this is a very controversial subject, and I understand that. Some people are very sensitive about it. I get that too. But we cannot keep ignoring the false flag phenomenon. I first got interested in this a while ago. I've long been a 9/11 truther, and I think it's important that we start talking about this. And interestingly enough, some of the best information I've ever gotten on this topic was from a UFO festival. And author Richard Dolan was speaking, and he did a presentation on false flags, and it totally made sense what he was saying. Basically, which is that the false flag phenomenon is distinctly modern. It's used as an ideological weapon to control populations with the fear of a manufactured enemy. They're used in ostensibly democratic systems where people believe they have inalienable rights, and this includes the United States, Israel, and Great Britain, where people must be shocked into socio-political and geopolitical consent. And as such, these operations require sophisticated modern propaganda systems and advanced covert operations teams. Here's the thing. False flags are real. We know they exist because we've proven that some of them have happened. Operation Gladio in the 50s, we know that happened.
And they do not have to be violent.
They do not have to be violent. Joining me, sorry, I got so wrapped up I forgot to introduce my awesome co-host, D.B. Schwartz, who I'm sure is more than versed on some of these. Another one is Operation Ajax in 1953. There was the Lavon Affair in 1954, COINTELPRO in the United States, the Gulf of Tonkin, which basically launched us into the Vietnam War. They tried to do Operation Northwoods, which would have been an attack on American jetliners. And blamed on Cuba. This was during the Cuban crisis, and Kennedy turned it down. These are all things you can look up. The first Gulf War had a false flag. Naria, it was a girl that basically was coached to lie about the Kuwaitis taking babies from their incubators and killing them. This was basically the legal justification used to get us into the first Gulf War. It was completely manufactured. Same as Gulf of Tonkin. So there's a history of this. You can say what you want about recent false flags, and we can have that argument. But the argument we're not going to have is that, well, the government wouldn't do that. They can, and they have, and they will. They've done it before, and they've also sent soldiers off to die under false pretenses, namely, every war since, a while. So the government can lie, and like DB said, it doesn't have to be violent. There are false flags in the media. There are false flags in the financial world. The Panama Papers was probably some kind of false flag. Notice we haven't heard anything.
Ironically enough, I believe that this pulling out of this Paris Accord is in its own right a fault. It was actually a preemptive strike against a false flag, which was carbon tax on the horizon. And I don't know how much you want to go down that rabbit hole, Jake.
But go ahead.
If all these accords continue to keep getting restrictive on oil and gas, which is totally fine, and then at the same time don't provide benefits, tax, and otherwise to allow the free market to fill those gaps with renewables, what they're instead doing, Jake, is they're using the pretense of fixing the environment for future generations to choke off our energy use, therefore our actual power and freedom. I hope people understand this.
Yeah, good analysis there. Richard Nolan's book is he's going to be working on a book, and I just spoke with him at a conference, and he's, as far as I know, this is going to be the only book, scholarly book on false flags. And he has identified the warning signs of a false flag, and we're going to go into this with Danny when he calls in. Warning signs. There is an immediate comprehensive narrative, including a convenient culprit. The official narrative has obvious domestic and geopolitical advantages for the governing body. The narrative behind the attack serves to leverage emotions like fear as well as patriotism in order to manufacture consent around a previously controversial issue. The best example of this, of course, is 9/11. There's absolutely no way that the Patriot Act would have gone through. There's no way we would have been at war with Afghanistan and Iraq and had 15 years of war in the Middle East without 9/11. Military training drills and police drills occur on the day of and very near the attack itself, causing confusion to obscure eyewitness testimony and allowing orchestrators to plant both patsies, disinformation, and backup operatives. This is a point that cannot be overlooked. Virtually every single major terrorist attack that has occurred since 9/11, and including 9/11, has involved military and training drills on the same day in close proximity. This includes NORAD drills of 9/11. It includes the 7/7 London bombings, the 2011 Norway shooting, the Aurora shooting, Sandy Hook, the Boston Marathon, and even the newest one in Manchester. And there are many others that I have not mentioned. We have to look into this because at a certain point, a coincidence stops being a coincidence. When there's always a major terror drill or police drill going on the day of a terror attack, I think it's time we start paying attention to it. There was also one at the attack at in L.A., the L.A. airport. This one's overlooked because it was a very small attack, but there was a terror drill on that day as well. It's almost every single one of them. And when Danny calls in, we're going to get into that.
And what does this build up to, Jake? Because I really question if people understand the motives, the underlying motives. So the mother of all conspiracy theories is the report from Iron Mountain, which was actually released in '67 officially, but they redacted a whole ton of stuff. You can find the unedited version and hardbound copies, the first edition. Have you ever heard of this, Jake? The report?
I haven't, no.
All right, so what the government did was, you have to understand that Vietnam was just starting and they felt that it was going to be quick and that if they needed to, they'd be able to use nuclear weapons again, and they found out they could not because China tested some of their own, so they knew if they exploded nuclear arms in the Vietnam War, China would feel like they would have to retaliate. So it didn't happen, right? All right, so 67, they're thinking to themselves, we're going to have to dominate the world in such a way that it's not going to probably be able to be militarily because of, mutually assured destruction. So they set in motion a panel of basically any expert and every expert you can imagine, any kind of field, scientific field, psychology, anything, you name it. So the goal was, how do we prepare the world for a warless future, because they intended to have it wrapped up in a one world government and actually to rule from the shadows and to conquer from the shadows, which is what we see all the time, Jake, which is every war we ever get into is always economic. It doesn't have anything to do with ideology or saving people, right, or stopping, stopping a mad dictator. Those things are used as the reasons, but we find as soon as we get in there, we do not stabilize, we do not invest, we take, we let it self-destruct, and when we leave, it's far worse. And that's a way that you control the world. You bring a world to its knees that way, and that's what I believe is happening. And the report from Iron Mountain was the blueprint for that. There was an actual blueprint. There was all kinds of psyops and psychological games they were going to play, including the whole ET and disclosure sphere that they were going to combine with what they at that time called advanced aerial holographics, aka Bluebeam. So this stuff's around the corner, man. I don't know if there's aliens. If there are, they're more advanced because they've obviously changed the sphere of their reality, either leaving their planet in a rocket ship or coming in dimensional time warp or whatever you want to call it.
Right,
So
and there could easily be an alien false flag disclosure. That's taking us a little bit outside our realm here. But I'm going to look up what is it? Something from the mountain.
yeah, report from Iron Mountain. I mean, if you can get a hold of the actual full text, which is thousands of pages,
and we want to go into everything that was laid out in Project for a New American Century prior to the war, prior to 9/11 as well. But first, I want to bring in our guest, Danny Quest. He's a writer, he's an activist, he's a hardcore truther, and I'm very happy to have him on the show. Danny, how you doing, buddy?
Hey, what's up, guys? Can you hear me? Am I coming in clear?
You're coming in loud and clear, man. Yeah.
Hey, what's up, Jake? What's up, DB?
Hey, man.
Anti-media community, how you guys doing? All the listeners.
We're good, man. I'm happy to have you on. I heard you on when Nick had his show. We had you on, and I knew I liked you then. And then I found out you're a hardcore truther, and then I liked you even more. And then I saw you going all out on Facebook in the last couple weeks. And hats off to you, man, because this is a very controversial issue, and I know you get a lot of hate, and this is just a tough issue to be an activist on. So I'm going to let you. Where do you want to start with this? Because I know you're far more involved in this than I am, and I want to let you talk.
All right.
Want to talk about?
Well, I definitely appreciate you having me on, Jake. The first thing I want to say is I'm sorry. I kind of bugged out on a lot of people the other day, and I know I said some things that were inappropriate, about other journalists who may not understand these things the same way that I do. This is really what I've invested the majority of my intellectual research into in my journalistic career is essentially into Middle Eastern geopolitics and false flags stemming from the war on terror, 9/11, how the covert deep state apparatus works, or what we call now the parallel clandestine structures. And I have a whole spiel. If you guys don't mind, can I just get into it? And I wrote a bunch of stuff because I really want to try to break this down for the world at large, and there's a lot going on behind the scenes that we need to know.
There's a lot to go through here, man. So just tear it up, man.
All right, awesome, man. Well, leaders throughout history have all acknowledged the use of false flags to justify their political agenda. Adolf Hitler himself said terrorism is the best weapon, for nothing drives people harder than the fear of sudden death, and the death has always been a primary motivation in these events, and fear. And we're going to start with what is a false flag, a terror attack, right? Because the definition itself has been kind of convoluted. Originally, a false flag was not a covert deep state operation like it is today. Historically speaking, a false flag is really what this name states. It's to fly a false flag, or to pretend to be something other than what you are. The word was first used to describe a tactic in naval warfare. For multiple reasons, it was good to have additional flags on your ship. Non-military merchant ships routinely have, they'd fly whatever flag of the region that they were in to help keep them safe, as nature clearly shows that sticking out can be a dangerous thing. While the term false flag, as we know it, has its origins in the sailing age, the concept or the idea to accomplish one's goals is much deeper. To take advantage of deceit can be traced back to the art of war in the 6th century BC by Sun Jiao, who said, all warfare is based on deception. When I describe what a false flag is, I know that seems real basic, but honestly, I'm surprised just how little, most people know about the actual what a false flag is. It's very important to understand if you want to get into how Manchester event was a false flag, to know the actual history of them.
Yeah, man. Let's why don't you want to start with there's a whole history here, and I'm glad that you broke it down into going back to the days of pirate ships, for God's sakes. I mean, this is not a new concept at all, and nor is it a new concept that a government would be willing to let its own people die. I mean, especially the U.S. government.
Yeah. We're going to get into that.
We're going to get into that. So let's. Why don't we reverse engineer the last 15 years? And let's start with the most recent one, because I know you've been very active on that one, the Manchester bombing. And although I'm not sure this is the best one to start with, because
let's not start yesterday. Let's start back. What I want to get into now actually is the different types of false flag.
Okay.
There's a lot of different types, and I think it's very important to be able to differentiate the difference, because each one is a little different. There are multiple types of false flags. The more common false flag tactics in the favorite of imperialists and governments are the ones looking to expand their borders, often disguised as a weaker enemy, and attack themselves to justify blowing the shit out of them. This has been used by Western elite establishments throughout the whole of history. From Rome to Great Britain to America, Hitler to Israel, governments looking to expand their borders have long known the proper way to motivate their citizens to go to war. This is why Nero danced while Rome burned. This is why Hitler burned down his Reichstag building. This is why the Irgun bombed the King David Hotel. This is how the underwear bomber was used by Homeland Security Chief Michael Chertoff to sell X-ray body scanners to thousands of airports internationally. Another type of false flag is to attack your enemy's enemy dressed as your enemy, and by starting a war that benefits you without any losses. This is what 9/11 actually was. 9/11 was someone attacking us dressed as our enemy so that we would attack their enemy. Essentially, we can get into that later, but Mossad's credo itself is, by way of deception, thou shalt do war, which is a old Hebrew translation of Proverbs 24:6 in the Bible, which says, "For by wise counsel thou shalt make war." The third talked about type of false flag is a political assassination. This is where agents disguise themselves as political rivals, thieves, or in special cases, even homicidal maniacs a la Kathy Gifford. There are what are commonly referred to as MK Ultra victims, named after the CIA's mind control experiments.
Which the government has admitted to. MK Ultra did exist. It's not a conspiracy theory anymore. It's real.
Exactly. The third seldom talked about type of false flag, the newest incarnation of the false flag is terrorism. To really understand false flag terrorism, we have to get into really that it is a psychological benefit of terror, specifically when it comes to the idea of ruling by terror. In 1513, Machiavelli said it's better to be feared than loved. The elite have long known that a nation afraid is much easier to control. Often people like me quote the Hegelian dialectic, what's known as the problem, reaction, solution. You can Google it. There's lots of videos and explanations of it, but to me, it's much easier than that. If you can control a person's emotions, then you can control what they're thinking about. And if you can control what they're thinking about, then you can manipulate this groupthink emotional zone and be able to control what they do and basically corral humans like cattle. And we are living in one vulnerable age, we're motivated by self-preservation. If we look at the industrial boom of productivity in the build-up of World War II, or the intelligence boom that we had during the Red Scare, these were both events motivated primarily by fear. The next type of false flag is a deception ran on the public by using media, right? And this is what you guys were talking about earlier, non-violent false flags, using disease scares to sell vaccines, or paying a bum to dress up like a Donald Trump supporter and start violence in the line. More recent events like these have created the advent of what I call the false flag industry. They can
just to interrupt here, and let's not forget that the hacking of Sony by North Korea was most likely false flags. So there's all kinds of false flags. Very few people knowledgeable of hacking actually believe North Korea hacked Sony. So proceed, my friend. I'm sorry, you're doing a clinic here. I won't even interrupt again.
Silence.
No, I was actually just getting to that. Basically, they've developed an entire false flag industry, and we're going to get into this later if we get into Manchester. Hopefully, I can speed up this presentation, and we'll find time, because I've actually found
Can we talk we got to talk about that girl, man. Now that's the 5th scene she's been on with her fake ass crying fucking face.
Yeah, we'll get it. We'll definitely get into crisis actors. I've actually discovered. I believe I've discovered who she works for. These organizations. If you guys want to get started earlier, you can look up crisis-solutions.com right now, and what you will find is that there's entire corporations that pull off these false flags for private individuals or governments. This is a career now, and they come complete with lighting, makeup, wardrobe, cameraman, actors, mics, set designers, even neuro-linguistic trained journalists and propaganda specialists, mass media marketing agents. They have entire clouds dedicated to Twitter and Facebook to pump these illusions to the public. Look it up. It's amazing. Crisis Cast and Crisis Solutions.
I think they're crisis actors, but I'm sorry, that woman does not look the same in all 5 pictures. Like,
no, that's not the same.
That's not the same damn woman.
Possibly 2 of them are. There's another one, Alex Israel. She was used in a few different ones. I do believe that there are literally ICMB actors and actresses that work directly with these corporations that I'm talking about, the Crisis Cast and Crisis Solution corporations. They disguise themselves as being for training exercises, but if you really research them, for example, if you go to the cloud on Crisis Solutions, watch the video, their promotional video, they literally talk about how they faked the London Bridge shooting from 2014. And that was presented to the public as a real event. And they're on their website like, yeah, this is how we did this little fake out the world thing.
Wow.
So that it's really we're getting into the deeper levels. There's also basically false flags go to the highest bidder now. So if you need to swing your election, you can contact them. If you need to sell some kind of security device or you need to scare somebody, there's a legitimate agency that you can contact now.
All right, man. There's so much to go into. I wish we had 2 hours for this because there's so much to go into. You said something interesting, which leads me to believe, obviously, the false flags got on the public radar after 9/11. And for good reason. I have a couple pages up here listing literally hundreds of anomalies from 9/11. That includes stock trades bet on the fallen shares for the 2 airlines whose planes were used in the attack. United Airlines and American Airlines stock rose to 4 and 25 times normal levels in the days preceding the attack. There's literally hundreds of more 9/11 anomalies. But you said something that leads me to believe that you think that 9/11 was not a full false flag, or were you suggesting that the Saudis were involved?
Yeah, the Saudis were involved. It was really the trilateral. It's the same people that have been involved from the LeVar affair to the Boston bombing to Naraya. Literally every false flag of the last 60 years dates back to the same people. The Lusitania event. We really don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to have to publish this, and I'll get the rest of this information out for everybody and link them. But essentially, every war in American history was started with a false flag. Even the Revolutionary War can be considered to be started with a false flag if you think about the Boston Tea Party. What patriots dressed up like Indians and committed an act of terrorism to motivate Americans to go to war. This was the same in World War I, the Lusitania event, where in order to get Americans involved in war, we basically paraded in front of a German U-boat. We tracked down a German U-boat and a passenger boat with 200 American citizens full of ammunition and had that shot down. World War II, of course, was Pearl Harbor. Pearl Harbor is a whole nother show that we could do. A lot of people like to argue about Pearl Harbor conspiracy theories or whatever, but it's pretty well established now that the events of Pearl Harbor were made to happen. I would refer everyone to go to the author H. McCollum memo, where he laid out an 8-point action plan to bring America into the war. And in this action plan, he described ways to essentially goad Japan into attacking America to justify American expansionism. This goes into Vietnam, the Gulf of Tonkin incident, which we found out later never even actually happened. All these, essentially, they're all manufactured events. USS Maine, it goes on and on. Another key thing, differentiation to make is Sibel Edmonds' work between Gladio A and Gladio B. Are you guys familiar with Gladio? I heard you mention it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the ones we listed.
Yeah,
Awesome.
The Vatican's biggest ruse they ever pulled.
Yeah, well, I mean, it involves the same power structures that we have today, and the power structure of the banking, the religious complexes, and the the government secret societies, the Skull and Bones, Order 332, these things. But essentially, Gladio was a stay-behind sleeper cell operation after World War II. NATO powers wanted to leave shadow sleeper cells between 8 to 10 people behind to prevent any kind of grassroots communist revolutions from forming. Eventually, they got bored and tried to figure out how to use these soldiers and started to do false flags. Literally dozens of false flags. As one participant in the program stated, you had to attack civilians, women, children, innocent people, unknown people far removed from any political game. The reason was quite simple. They were supposed to force these people, the Italian public, to turn to the state and ask for greater security, so that a state of emergency could be declared so that people would willingly trade their freedom for security. This was Gladio A, and they would literally have false flag terrorist events all over Europe. And what we're going through, what we see now is termed by Sibel Edmonds, FBI whistleblower, as Gladio B. And it's essentially the same idea, where they concocted this enemy of the state, this unifying force of radical Islamic terrorism, and they continue to perpetuate and stage these false flag terror events to unite us against that common enemy, to justify expansionism, to have us accept greater security over, while sacrificing our liberty.
Cool, man. So Richard Dolan, when he did his presentation, he basically said that we're in an era of false flags, and that it started with 9/11, and it's gone on through then. Now, literally, even as we're speaking, I'm having friends comment on the me saying, "Jake, no, please, 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 no." Like, there are people that literally don't even want to talk about this. So I think one of the important things to note with this topic is the resistance of people to even think about it. And that's part of the social conditioning that goes into it.
But just appeal to the logic, because why would this power structure not exist like this? How else do you get vast sums of money without any accounting of it, unless you monopolize the black market and these awful, horrible things that people want to do in this world and pay for it? I mean, that's the truth of it. And the power structures, the military, the full military might of a country, that already was tried in World War II, and a whole bunch of people died and nobody won. It was just a bunch of stuff happened and blew up. Everybody knows the way to really win this whole world and do it the right way is with hearts and minds, and I really don't know how you do it without vast sums of money to buy propaganda.
Well, that's exactly why the United States is in the position they are. Not only do we have the military infrastructure to do this, we have the media infrastructure to control the narrative at home, and we can influence other countries to either be involved or to keep their mouths shut.
We control it abroad too, Jake, because I just got back from Europe, and I must say it is Americanized.
So Danny, in your research, what do you think? Why do you think people are so reluctant to talk about this? I've had a publisher, a woman who was a publisher, published one of my stories, and she lives in New York. And when I started talking about 9/11 a little bit, she got very, emotionally worked up, even though I barely said anything. And people from Boston are the same way. People from Connecticut are the same way. Look, we get it that it's sad if people are dying. And I don't want to get into the issue yet of whether bodies were faked, because I think that brings you out of the realm. I mean, it could be true, but to me, it breaks the conversation, because people immediately just go ballistic. What do you think? What's been the biggest resistance point for you in trying to talk about this with other people?
It's important that people understand history, right? Project Northwoods is a declassified document where America said that they were going to crash a remote-controlled passenger jet over Cuba, and have mock funerals of fake people that died and say that Fidel Castro shot this commercial jet down, and use that as pretext to invade Cuba. Right. So it's not that these ideas are far-fetched. That's not even the only example. There's multiple other examples. The main reason why people like me face so much pushback is what Aldous Huxley talked about in A Brave New World, is we are living under a technocratic and pharmaceutical propaganda complex, and people have been through 15, 20 years of 4 or 5 hours a day of school, radio, and media that continually perpetuate the same lies over and over again. And I mean, that's another Nazi quote. If you tell a lie a certain amount of times, it becomes a truth. That's a Goebbels quote. That's not Nazis. Adolf Hitler's head propagandist. Something I heard the other day was very interesting. Said if Joseph Goebbels had Facebook, he would have had time to stay at home with his family. And that's just the truth. Is we're so propagandized, and the conditioning is so strong that any hint at breaking that condition is it causes intense what's called cognitive dissonance, which is a term that's very classically thrown around and people don't use it correctly. But essentially, when your grandmother and your mom and your favorite school teacher all told you something was one way, and then Danny Quest comes along and shows you with facts that it wasn't, you don't want to go into your brain and erase what your mom and your grandmother and your favorite teacher said and plug in my stupid ass. You don't want to do it. So you would much rather hide from the truth and continue to live in a manufactured paradigm that is comfortable to you. And that's to everybody listening that's not willing to wake up to the reality of what I'm talking about.
And to be clear to everyone listening, I personally am not asking people to believe definitively any particular false flag. Now, I wrote an article for the Anti-Media. There was 5 confirmed false flags, and I'm talking about the historical ones such as Gladio and Gulf of Tonkin and whatnot. As far as the more recent emotionally triggering ones, for example, Boston or Sandy Hook, all I ask is for people to consider the evidence and look, at the facts. Now, to me, the most obvious false flags are the ones in which there is a direct motive for the governing body to do it. So with 9/11, to me, it was very obvious that whether or not this was simply a U.S. black ops or whether this was a coalition of different black ops, it had a very definitive purpose, which was outlined in Project for a New American Century, which Wesley Clark then later reaffirmed, which is that we wanted to go into 7 countries in the Middle East. We needed a pretext to do it. And we needed a pretext for the Patriot Act, which paved the way for the surveillance state. Very, very obvious motives, way more motives than I think the terrorists had. When you get to something like Sandy Hook, I get confused because the primary motive behind Sandy Hook was ostensibly to pave the way for gun control legislation, right?
Yes.
But that never happened. The gun control legislation never happened, and we haven't seen a push for it since. So with that one, I get confused. And in general, I think the purpose behind these false flags is to maintain a constant pulse of fear in the country. They could now attack any country we want in the Middle East. It created 15 years of profits for the defense contractors, for the military-industrial complex. That's what, to me, 9/11 is just, it's like the biggest one, not just because of how many people died, but because of how much it accomplished. Now, after 9/11, we have the London bombings, and we have, the Norway shooting. Now, I personally don't think every single, and you've said this in your Facebook too, you don't think every single attack is a false flag. There are actual people out there that want to do damage, that are not on a payroll of a government, and that are just radicalized individuals. So what do you look for in a false flag? You're very convinced about Manchester. What have you seen of Manchester that makes you so certain that it was a false flag?
I have a list. There's what I call, and I'm actually working on an article / podcast with this. I got an interview coming up with a guy named Ali Demagog, and he's a false flag researcher from Norway. He was intimately involved in the Norway shooting, and his research into false flags, the government actually chased him out of the country, and now he's living in Spain. But he has a series of what he calls false flag blueprints. And essentially there is a list of things that in all of these Gladio B style events that you'll find, they're similar to 9/11. They'll leave behind some kind of passports. The perpetrator had recent arrests and got a very little sentence or were let off. The government had been warned of the attack by another government. That happens all the time in these false flags. Most recently in this one, the FBI reportedly warned MI6 about some, and I'll bet you'll find that in all of them. You'll find that eyewitness accounts, especially social network eyewitness accounts and alternative media research, YouTube eyewitness accounts differ from the average the scripted official version. If you think of San Bernardino, the eyewitnesses said they saw 3 men, white men in all black. The same with Sandy Hook. Witnesses said they seen a man wearing camouflage and a van full of nuns. The same with Orlando. And it's just a perpetual thing. Another thing is the perpetrators. They don't go to trial. They either die or completely never get found. There's almost never a trial. And when there is a trial, a la Boston bombing, the defense attorney admitted to everything within the first 10 minutes of the trial, which is pretty interesting. Another thing is that the victim of a crime, or a victim should have been killed, but miraculously can give the details of event. Like the guy had both his legs blown off in Boston bombing, and he was pitching a baseball 2 weeks later. This kind of thing. Or the guy in Orlando, Angel Colin, who was supposedly shot in his hand and then waved to the camera. There's all kinds of different inconsistencies with the injuries. Another key ingredient would be the videos. There's always missing videos, or missing CCTV, unclear, grainy, photoshopped footage. There's never any clear footage. Nice is a great example. The UK Parliament building is a great example. They turned off. Why would they turn off the CCTV cameras in one of the most secure buildings in the United Kingdom, the Parliament buildings?
And England is like the king of surveillance. I mean, England. You think the United States has intense surveillance? We're nothing compared to the Great Britain. So it's pretty suspicious anytime surveillance missing. I'll be honest, I haven't done my research on Manchester. This whole topic makes me nauseous. And years ago, I thought about really delving in and devoting my life to it. And then I just decided that I like the smell of flowers, and I liked waking up in the morning and feeling happy, even though that doesn't happen either for me. But, false flags are very, it cuts to the heart of the deep state, which we talk about all the time. And, but I have a theory, which is that you're close to the truth when a lot of intelligent people give you pushback for irrational reasons. When people are unwilling to look at the evidence, when people are unwilling to consider a theory, that the propaganda has worked very well. I'm literally talking with someone on Facebook right now about it. He's trolling me. And this is a lawyer, and a very intelligent lawyer I went to school with. So we have our work cut out for us moving forward. And I don't think the false flags are going to stop. In fact, what I think is going to happen, and unfortunately I think it's going to happen soon, is I think there is going to be another massive one. I think there's going to be another 9/11 style one. Even Noam Chomsky, who has historically been basically not anti-false flag, but he's not a truther, and he has not come out in support of the truther movement. Even Noam Chomsky recently has stated that he thinks it's possible Donald Trump could come up with a false flag. And everyone knows that if there was a major terrorist attack on the U.S. right now, we would go into martial law. Trump would have impunity to do what he wants. And, of course, the deep state would get behind him. The media would get behind him. All the opposition he faced would go away. And there we go. And, that's game over if there's another major terrorist attack.
Well, it's not. That's why I do what I do, Jake. Is not only am I a false flag researcher, right? This is really what I want to do. There's a lot of people, James Fetchker, Kevin Barrett, Ollie, Max Egan, Mark Pascal. So there's a lot of false flag researchers in the world. I'm not the first person to do this. I get shocked when I find older people that I didn't know did this, because I just started doing it. They feel the same way that I feel. But I'm also an anarchist, right? And we can withdraw our consent from the government in the same way that we talk about Sandy Hook was for gun compensation, or Orlando shooting was for gun compensation. But after both of those events, gun scales went up, right? The deep state failed. And that's the thing we need to recognize, is that the deep state apparatus, the neocon Zionist false flag apparatus, is not infallible. They're not even really in control. They have more resources. They have literally social network farms, which are rooms full of 500 iPhones that are controlled by one computer. One person can control 500 Twitter accounts, Facebook accounts, Instagram accounts, all at the same time. You know what I mean? Talk about trolling. Like, they control. Not only do they do that, but they use algorithms and special software to find where these heated debates are going on YouTube, so that they can use their, technological methods to sway their decision or sway their opinion and their direction. And that's why we see so much of this cognitive dissonance and alt-right brainwashing taking place right now in the particularly YouTube community, is because those in power, those that are in control of these platforms, are using those to manipulate and control people's minds. So what I'm trying to do is break the paradigm, right? And if there was a false flag attack, depending on where it was, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to enter into World War III. That doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to abide by a draft or abide by martial law, because we are legitimately in a mass awakening right now. It might not seem like it. It might seem like we're facing this resistance, but legitimately words like the deep state and false flag, we're not in the normal lexicon. We're not on Fox News 5-10 years ago. Like, even this Manchester event, I think you liked it. It was Donald Trump got mad at CNN for calling Manchester a right-wing false flag. Like, we're living in a backwards world, but we're people like me, the truther community, the enlightenment activist community, the anarchist community, we're growing in power as the mainstream media fails, as the state fails. We're taking back the minds and the hearts of the people. So I don't at all feel hopeless. I actually feel quite comfortable moving forward.
So you're still smelling the flowers.
Yeah, it was a long road. I mean, it hurts bouncing off the walls, falling down a rabbit hole, and coming to the reality that your entire world is a lie. We haven't even scratched the surface in this conversation, how all these events are interconnected, and how, a lot of what we think we know, we don't really know, especially when it comes to nationalism and patriotism and war and false flag terrorism and radical Islam and all these kind of things. It's not like... The real world is not like the media projects it to be. If there's anybody listening, I know we don't have time. If you want to wake up, like if right now, if you're angry at what I'm saying, if you don't believe what I'm saying, you want to debate me, you're furious, the first thing that I would recommend doing is turn off your television. Just don't watch television. If you do want to watch the things that are on television, the shows and the sports, get a streamer box or get Netflix or something like that. Don't interject. Don't take a part of the commercials and the CNN media apparatus, the Fox News, MSNBC. It's literally brainwashing. Please hold the mainstream media to the same level of personal and credibility that you hold me to. If I had the resources and I was a journalist and I was in Manchester, I would get some kind of evidence of proof of death, or I would get some kind of evidence of actual injuries, or I would do real journalist work. And most journalists, especially in the mainstream media, are just puppets. They read a script. They're not investigators at all. They don't care about the story. They're not trying to empower you through information. They're trying to read and regurgitate for a paycheck.
All right. Yeah, we could devote 4 hours to this easily.
Without a doubt. I could do a 8-hour presentation.
DB, what are your thoughts right now? I know you were vocal at the beginning about some false flags, but where do you think we are in terms of shedding light on some of these things? And it's so difficult because it's so difficult to come up with evidence for stuff because there's such a big cover up. What are your thoughts right now on this?
I think the mother of all conspiracy theories is going to be brought up on the show following ours, which is Traffic Report with L. Deeds and JT and Howie. We've had them on before, but that's going to be their third show. What they're going to delve into is the biggest conspiracy theory that's becoming true in front of our eyes, which is there's this global ring that really, really, really prizes children, and they pretty much drive the missing children in the world and go around to places like Haiti and Africa and anywhere they can grab people, and even here in the U.S. And this is a major pillar of the power structure that's being exposed right now, and that has to go down for the future, pretty much, of our humanity, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, that's an important issue as well.
They're intertwined too. The same elites, the same shadow government families that are involved in the drug running, are involved in the pedophilia and human trafficking rings, are the same ones that perpetuate this fear. They're the same ones that capitalize from this narrative. They're the same ones who are heavily invested into the military-industrial complex and are also tied into occult rituals. I didn't even get a chance to get into that in this conversation, but that's another thing that you'll find in a lot of these false flag terror events and a lot of terror events in general, especially some of the ones that are ritual sacrifices, like 9/11, like, some of the other ones where people are actually harmed, where they're actually trying to enact some kind of powerful creation or whatever. Like, you have to get into really the occult side of it, but that's what our enemy is. Our enemy is wickedness in high places. So that's why we're coming together. And I really appreciate you guys having me on, man. I love what you guys do at the Anti-Media, man. Nick is awesome. Carrie is phenomenal. If you guys want to find me, where I'll be over at the Fifth Column. I'll be on my website, thetruther.us. I work with Derek Rose and the Conscious Resistance Network. I'm going to be traveling this summer. I'll be at Rainbow Festival. I'll be at Jackalope Festival. I'll be at the Conscious Resistance Tour in Cincinnati. And I'll also be doing YouTube. I got a lot of YouTube podcasts coming out soon.
Yeah, and those are, Fifth Column is great. The Conscious Resistance is great. I had Derek on the show a few weeks ago. Great stuff he's doing there. And all of this stuff is interconnected. There's like you said, there's wickedness in high places right now, and all we're trying to do is decode what is ruling this country right now is this narrative of fear, and the security state, the national security state, which was born after 9/11, is still very much our reality right now. And so this is an important topic to delve into. And there's you don't see a lot of academics going after this. You don't see a lot of people in high places asking questions about this. And what's interesting is that Trump's base, the alt-right, is basically a truther community. Many of Trump's base, and he himself has expressed skepticism towards 9/11. So what will be interesting?
They're surprisingly selective about what they do and do not believe, and there's some things they view as completely conspiratorial that have basis in truth, and that goes for the other side as well, the extreme left. So they play it either way, and in the middle is where they sit and they profit. It doesn't matter which way it goes.
Right. And
I think it's a planned paradigm. The truth that Donald Trump's administration and the right, I describe it as the parallel Israeli deep state. The Israeli deep state, the Zionist deep state, is kind of two parts. It's the ultra right wing government of Bibi Netanyahu, and then it's the American, like Sheldon Adelson, the billionaires. So there's like a Zionist billionaire group, and then there's like the extreme right-wing military group, and they're parallel. They have similar ideologies and similar goals, but they're also different in their operational structure and how they actually work.
And Sheldon Adelson, of course, was the owner of the World Trade Center, who took out a whopping insurance policy on it about 2 weeks before the attacks.
What a lucky guy.
Yeah, I know. What are the chances?
You're thinking of Larry Silverstein.
Oh.
Sheldon Adelson.
My bad.
Sheldon Adelson owned Time Warner, I think, or he's a big media conglomerate, It's him, the Koch brothers, Rupert Murdoch, the right-wing mainstream media people.
Yeah, I got those two mixed up, but
it's all right. It happens. They're also tied into Saudi Arabia too. Did you know the Prince of Saudi Arabia, Saab? I can't remember his name, but he's the third biggest owner of Fox, or he was up until recently. Most people didn't know Fox was owned by Saudi Arabia, but yeah, they're all they're part of the West's agenda. The Saudi Arabia, Israel, United Kingdom, America, the elite, the ally forces. They all are pushing towards the a similar goal.
Right.
I think what we did was we solidified Saudi Arabia as a vassal state by pumping them with $175 billion in arms. So they're fully under our thumb now, and we're intertwined. And we're of course going to use their oil fields because our power is air power, and unfortunately, no matter what kind of new technology comes around, they're going to need gas and oil for a while for our jets. And I think pulling out of the Paris Accord was just. It's to keep that going. As soon as Saudi Arabia starts kind of running dry, we'll just frack our own Saudi Arabia right here in the U.S., and we're going to extend this foreign policy of controlling the skies, basically, as our foreign policy.
Indeed. And I mean, wasn't the United Qatar, the Arab immigrants, that region was essentially outpost state for American military supremacy anyway.
All right, so we've got about like 1 minute left, man. Is there if there's a way you want to close this out?
Yeah, man. I just want to thank everybody for letting me be on. I want to apologize again to Claire and Jason, everybody from the Free Thought Project, Nick. I mean, I know you guys can't really cover this stuff like I can, right? And that's one of the things that's kind of why I'm here, right? Like I don't have any advertisement revenue. I'm not beholden to YouTube. I can say whatever the hell I want, and I don't have to worry about any ramifications. So catch me, man. It's been an honor.
Hey, thanks for coming on.
See you guys next time, man.
Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Jake. Thanks, Stevie.
Thank you,
have
buddy.
a good night.
Take
Peace.
care, everyone. Do your research.
Yeah, man. Find me on the Truther.
Stay on for traffic report. They're coming up right after.
Yo, here we go through the stereo. This is live through the stereo. Go and let it blow through the stereo. I'ma let them know through the stereo. Yo, here we go through the stereo.
You are listening